Hello, and welcome. My name is William McKinley, and I had the honor of serving as the 25th President of the United States. I invite you to travel with me through time, to walk along the paths I once walked, and to hear my story in my own words. From the quiet streets of Niles, Ohio, where I spent my childhood, to the bustling corridors of power in Washington, D.C., my life was filled with moments of joy, challenge, and unexpected change. I learned early the importance of honesty, hard work, and faith, lessons my family quietly instilled in me every day. As we journey together, I will share not only the public events that marked my life, but also the small, personal moments, reading by candlelight, helping my neighbors, dreaming of a future I could shape. I hope that listening to my story will bring a sense of calm, curiosity, and perhaps a touch of inspiration as we explore history together. As I entered my early teenage years, life in Niles began to feel both familiar and expanding. The quiet streets and the woods I had explored countless times still held comfort, but I became increasingly aware of a larger world beyond our town. The lessons I had learned in childhood, honesty, diligence, and faith, remained my guide, but adolescence brought new questions, new challenges, and a growing curiosity that pulled me outward. School became a central part of my days. I attended a small local school where lessons in arithmetic and grammar were supplemented with history, literature, and natural sciences. I remember sitting at my desk, poring over books, captivated by stories of distant lands, explorers, and people who had changed the world through courage, intelligence, and perseverance. These stories sparked a desire to understand the world and to imagine how I might one day contribute to it. Reading became my refuge and companion. I spent countless hours with my nose in books, whether it was a history of nations, tales of adventure, or biographies of remarkable individuals. The world seemed larger with each page, and my mind began to wander far beyond the boundaries of our town. I asked questions, made connections, and dreamed of what I could learn, achieve, and one day share with others. At home, my parents continued to be my teachers in ways both subtle and profound. My father showed me the importance of steady work and integrity. Watching him rise early each day, tending the fields, assisting neighbors, and performing his duties without complaint, taught me that true character is revealed in everyday actions. My mother, with her gentle patience, emphasized compassion, reflection, and the importance of faith in guiding one's decisions. Their lessons shaped not just my mind, but my character. Work and responsibility began to take on new meaning during these years. I was expected to assist with household chores more consistently, and I took part in community efforts. Whether helping neighbors with farm work or learning practical skills at home, I discovered that effort and dedication were as important as knowledge. I learned to value the balance between study and service, between curiosity and responsibility. Social life also began to take a more important place in my life. Friendships developed not just as playmates, but as companions in exploration, discussion, and learning. I discovered the value of loyalty, empathy, and trust. Sharing small adventures in the woods, discussing books and ideas, and supporting one another through challenges deepened my understanding of human connection. I began to see that a person's character is revealed not only in their actions toward themselves, but in the care and respect they show toward others. During these years, I also became more aware of the world beyond Niles. I read newspapers, listened to travelers' accounts, and discussed events with neighbors. Stories of pioneers moving west, debates about politics, and changes in commerce and technology fascinated me. I began to comprehend that the world was a complex place, full of challenges and opportunities, and that understanding it required observation, study, and critical thought. Nature continued to be both my playground and my teacher. Walking through the forests, observing the streams and wildlife, and noticing the changing seasons taught me patience, curiosity, and attentiveness. I learned to appreciate the rhythm of life, the quiet lessons in the natural world, and the importance of observation before action. These experiences grounded me and offered moments of peace amid the growing responsibilities of adolescence. Evenings at home remained times of reflection and learning. The family hearth became a place of storytelling, discussion, and quiet contemplation. My parents shared memories of their youth, told tales of courage and perseverance, and discussed events from our town and the wider world. Listening to these stories, I began to understand the threads that connected individual lives, families, communities, and nations. I realized that every person has the potential to influence their surroundings, and that understanding, empathy, and action were keys to living a meaningful life. By the end of this period, I had established habits of study, reflection, and exploration that would carry me forward. My curiosity had grown into a disciplined desire to learn, my compassion into a commitment to service, and my imagination into a vision of a life guided by principles. The foundations of character, knowledge, and ambition were solidly in place, preparing me for the challenges, responsibilities, and adventures that lay ahead in the coming years of adolescence. I was born on January 29, 1843, in the small town of Niles, Ohio. Our town was quiet and peaceful, surrounded by gentle hills and forests, with rivers reflecting the changing sky. My parents, William and Nancy McKinley, were simple, hardworking people, but their warmth and quiet wisdom filled our home. From an early age, I learned that honesty, diligence, and faith were the guiding principles of life. My earliest memories are of waking up to the soft light of dawn, the smell of fresh bread from the kitchen, and the sound of birds singing outside our windows. Life was simple yet rich with meaning. I spent hours exploring the woods, climbing trees, and observing the changing seasons. Every day brought lessons in patience, observation, and the beauty of quiet moments. My father rose early each morning, tending the fields and assisting our neighbors. He never complained and always acted with kindness. My mother managed the household with quiet strength, teaching me patience, empathy, and the importance of faith. Together, they laid the foundation of my character, showing me that simple acts of love and service are deeply meaningful. Books became my companions as soon as I could read. I would sit by the window, sunlight falling across the pages, lost in stories of distant lands, brave leaders, and ordinary people achieving remarkable things. These stories sparked my curiosity and inspired dreams of how I might make a difference in the world someday. Life in Niles offered small adventures every day. I played with friends in the woods, fished in nearby streams, and explored the surrounding hills. Simple chores at home, like tending the garden or helping my parents, taught responsibility and discipline. Though ordinary, these experiences shaped my understanding of work, effort, and care. Evenings were times of reflection. My family would gather around the hearth, and my parents would share stories of their childhoods, the history of our town, and tales of courage and perseverance. I learned that history was not just in books, but alive in the lives of those around me. Every story became a lesson in resilience, hope, and human connection. Schooling in Niles was modest but meaningful. I attended a small local school where teachers encouraged curiosity, critical thinking, and discipline. I loved learning arithmetic, reading literature, and exploring the natural world. Often, I would stay after class, asking questions, reading extra books, and discussing ideas with those who shared my love for knowledge. My parents valued manners, moral conduct, and faith. I remember attending church regularly and observing neighbors helping one another, families supporting each other, and the quiet dignity of everyday life. These lessons grounded me, giving me a sense of belonging and responsibility long before I imagined leading a nation. Childhood was also a time of reflection. I often pondered my future, imagining the paths I might take and the person I wanted to become. I dreamed of serving my community, helping others, and making choices that would leave a positive impact. These quiet reflections shaped my ambitions, planting the seeds of leadership and service that would guide me for the rest of my life. As I grew older, my world expanded. I learned about national events, about neighbors moving west, and about changes in society. I began to understand that my small town was part of a larger world full of challenges, opportunities, and people with rich, complex stories. Yet, no matter how far my mind traveled, I always felt rooted in Niles, where the lessons of home, family, and community would stay with me forever. I spent countless hours wandering through the forests, following the streams, and observing the animals and plants around me. I was fascinated by the natural world and often asked questions about how things grew, why seasons changed, and how the sun and moon affected our lives. My parents encouraged this curiosity, patiently answering my questions and guiding me toward books and resources that could expand my understanding. During the winter months, when the snow covered the town I found joy in small indoor activities. Reading by candlelight, helping my mother with knitting or household chores, and listening to my father recount stories of history and family tradition became my cherished routines. These quiet, reflective hours taught me the value of patience, attentiveness, and finding wonder in everyday life. That I also began to notice the character of the people around me. I admired neighbors who worked tirelessly to help one another, who showed kindness to strangers, and who maintained their dignity through hardships. I learned that leadership was not only about titles or recognition, but about integrity, service, and the consistent demonstration of good character in small, everyday actions. School became more than a place to learn facts. It became a space to practice curiosity, reasoning, and collaboration. I remember studying arithmetic and grammar, reading history and geography, and discovering the stories of people who had shaped the world in significant ways. I began to understand that education was a path to opportunity, a way to understand the world and find one's place within it. As I approached my teenage years, I also started to contemplate my responsibilities at home and in the community. I helped with chores, assisted neighbors, and contributed where I could. These early experiences of service and responsibility were as formative as any classroom lesson, teaching me that action and effort often speak louder than words. Through these experiences, I began to shape my identity. I learned to value honesty, perseverance, kindness, and curiosity. I nurtured a desire to contribute to society, to help those in need, and to pursue a life guided by principles rather than convenience. The values instilled in me during these early years would remain at the core of who I was, shaping the choices I would make and the life I would lead. As I moved further into my teenage years, my world became more structured, yet full of possibility. Schooling took on a deeper significance. I began attending more advanced classes, where reading, writing, and arithmetic were joined by lessons in rhetoric, history, and moral philosophy. Each subject opened my mind to new perspectives, encouraging me to think critically and to consider not just what the world was, but what it might become. My curiosity continued to expand. I spent long hours in study, sometimes alone in a quiet corner of our home, other times walking the fields and observing nature while pondering the ideas I had encountered in books. I was fascinated by the patterns of the natural world, the stories of past leaders, and the moral dilemmas that shaped human history. These observations taught me that life was a complex tapestry, woven from choices, actions, and consequences, and that understanding this tapestry required patience, reflection, and discernment. At home, my parents remained my steady guides. My father's example of hard work, responsibility, and fairness continued to inspire me. I watched him navigate daily challenges with calm determination, and I absorbed the lesson that true strength comes from perseverance and integrity rather than outward recognition or reward. My mother encouraged my inner life, emphasizing the importance of thoughtfulness, compassion, and moral reflection. Together, they instilled in me the belief that character is built in quiet, consistent ways, and that it is tested in both small and great moments. Community life remained a vital influence on my development. I observed neighbors helping one another, families supporting each other, and the rhythm of daily work and celebration. Participating in chores and small community tasks reinforced my understanding that contribution and responsibility go hand in hand. The experiences I gained from helping others and observing their actions shaped my sense of duty and the desire to be of service in the broader world. Friendship became more nuanced and meaningful. I formed connections with peers who shared my curiosity and sense of responsibility. We explored the woods, discussed books, and debated ideas that challenged our minds. These relationships taught me empathy, loyalty, and the value of collaboration. I learned that the people around us influence our growth as much as the lessons we read in books or hear from our parents. True friendship became a mirror for my own character and a guide in understanding the perspectives of others. That I also began to experience the stirrings of ambition. The stories I read of statesmen, inventors, and explorers inspired me to envision a life of purpose. I dreamed of contributing to my community, of making decisions that might help others, and of striving for a life that combined knowledge, responsibility, and moral integrity. These aspirations were tempered with humility. I understood that growth requires patience, effort, and the willingness to learn from mistakes. During these years, nature remained a refuge and teacher. I spent hours observing the forests, streams, and fields, noting the rhythms of life and the changing seasons. These quiet moments offered clarity and perspective, allowing me to reflect on my studies, ambitions, and the lessons I had learned from my family and community. Nature taught me that time, patience, and observation are necessary for understanding, and that beauty and knowledge are often discovered in quiet, unassuming places. Schoolwork became more challenging, but also more rewarding. I learned to research, to formulate arguments, and to present my ideas with clarity. Writing essays and reports taught me the power of language, while history lessons revealed the consequences of choices and the patterns of human behavior. Through these exercises, I began to understand that knowledge without wisdom is incomplete, and that learning is most valuable when it informs character and action. That I also began to take notice of the wider world. Conversations with neighbors, reading newspapers, and hearing accounts from travelers brought news of political change, economic developments, and social movements. I understood that my small town was connected to a much larger world, one full of opportunity and challenge. These insights strengthened my desire to learn, to prepare myself for a life of meaningful contribution, and to engage with the world thoughtfully and responsibly. By the end of this period, I had developed a deeper sense of self, a stronger foundation of knowledge, and a clearer vision for the kind of life I wished to lead. I had cultivated habits of study, reflection, and service, and I had begun to understand the importance of character, empathy, and integrity in shaping the decisions I would one day make. The values and experiences of these years became the framework for the young man I was becoming, ready to face the challenges and responsibilities of later adolescence and early adulthood. As I approached the final years of my adolescence, life grew more complex and my ambitions became more defined. The foundations laid in childhood and early teenage years, curiosity, diligence, empathy, and moral integrity, continued to guide me, but now I began to see their relevance in a broader and more serious context. I started contemplating not just my immediate surroundings, but the responsibilities I might hold in the world beyond Niles. School remained a central focus, yet my attention increasingly turned to practical knowledge and preparation for the future. I studied more advanced subjects, including rhetoric, political economy, and the principles of law and governance. These lessons intrigued me, for they revealed how societies function, how decisions are made, and how leadership shapes the lives of many. I began to imagine what it might be like to serve in a role that required both judgment and compassion, where choices could influence not just a family or town, but a broader community. That I devoted myself to reading extensively, often late into the evening. I explored biographies of leaders, histories of nations, and accounts of human innovation and discovery. Each story offered lessons, examples of perseverance, courage, and the complexities of human nature. I considered the lives of those who had faced adversity and emerged stronger, and I wondered how I might prepare myself for challenges yet to come. My work at home and within the community continued to be a source of growth. I took on responsibilities that tested my patience, skill, and commitment. Whether assisting neighbors, managing household tasks, or contributing to local events, I learned that leadership begins with small actions performed consistently and conscientiously. I discovered the profound value of service, of meeting obligations without complaint, and of the quiet satisfaction that comes from helping others. Friendship and social bonds deepened. I sought companions who shared my curiosity, my sense of responsibility, and my desire to improve myself and my community. Together, we discussed ideas, debated issues of morality and justice, and learned from one another's perspectives. These relationships reinforced the understanding that character is both reflected in and shaped by those with whom we choose to associate. I realized that empathy, respect, and trust are essential not only to friendship, but to all human endeavors. During this period, I also began to confront personal challenges and self-doubt. Adolescence brought questions of identity, purpose, and capability. I occasionally feared that my efforts might fall short, or that my ambitions were beyond my reach. Yet, these moments of uncertainty taught me resilience. I learned that persistence, reflection, and a willingness to learn from mistakes are as crucial to growth as talent or intellect. That my fascination with the wider world intensified. I read newspapers, studied national events, and listened carefully to the perspectives of travelers and elders. I followed debates over governance, commerce, and societal change. I became increasingly aware that the principles of justice, fairness, and service were not only personal ideals, but the foundation of a functioning society. I began to see that knowledge and integrity, combined with effort and leadership, could make a meaningful difference in the lives of many. Nature remained my sanctuary and teacher. Long walks in the forests and along the rivers allowed me to reflect on my studies, my ambitions, and my personal growth. Observing the changing seasons, the behaviors of animals, and the quiet rhythm of the world around me brought calm and clarity. These moments reminded me of the value of patience, observation, and attentiveness, qualities essential not only in nature, but in life and leadership. It'd be why the end of these formative years, I had established a strong sense of identity, purpose, and direction. I had cultivated habits of study, reflection, service, and moral discernment that would carry me forward into adulthood. The combination of education, family guidance, community involvement, and personal exploration had prepared me for the responsibilities, challenges, and opportunities that lay ahead. Looking back on my youth, I recognized that every experience, whether joyous or challenging, had contributed to the shaping of my character. The curiosity that drove my studies, the compassion learned at home, the discipline developed through work, and the friendships that taught empathy and trust all became part of the foundation on which I would build my future. These lessons would guide me as I moved from adolescence into adulthood, from the small town of Niles into the wider world, ready to embrace the roles, duties, and opportunities that awaited. As I stood on the threshold of adulthood, I felt a quiet confidence, rooted in the values, knowledge, and experiences I had acquired. I knew that challenges would come, but I was prepared to face them with diligence, integrity, and hope. The years of study, reflection, and service had shown me the importance of combining knowledge with character, ambition with empathy, and leadership with responsibility. With this foundation, I was ready to begin the next chapter of my life, carrying forward the lessons of my youth into the broader world that awaited me. As I moved beyond the familiar streets of Niles and the routines of school, I entered a world of responsibility and opportunity. The lessons of my youth, diligence, honesty, and moral integrity, remained with me, but now they would be tested in new ways. I sought to apply myself, to learn through work, and to understand the practical realities of life beyond the classroom and home. Why first positions, though modest, offered invaluable lessons. I learned the importance of punctuality, diligence, and thoroughness. Each task, whether it involved managing accounts, assisting in small businesses, or performing everyday chores, taught me that reliability and careful attention were fundamental. The satisfaction of completing work well instilled a quiet confidence and a deeper sense of personal responsibility. Alongside work, I devoted myself to study. I recognized that learning is a lifelong pursuit. I read extensively, from literature to histories of nations, from moral philosophy to practical guides on law and governance. Each book expanded my understanding of human society, leadership, and the responsibilities that come with knowledge. The more I learned, the more I realized the significance of applying knowledge with wisdom and ethical judgment. I began to take notice of the wider world, observing not just my town, but the surrounding regions. Stories of economic development, political debates, and social movements fascinated me. I followed these events closely, eager to understand how communities functioned, how decisions were made, and how leaders influenced the lives of many. These observations deepened my desire to contribute meaningfully to society. Armed with both knowledge and character at home, my parents continued to shape my moral compass. My father's unwavering dedication to work, fairness, and community service remained a constant example. My mother's guidance emphasized reflection, compassion, and integrity. Their lessons reinforced the idea that character is demonstrated not in grand statements, but in daily actions performed with conscientiousness and care. Friendships during this time were formative. I sought companions who shared my curiosity, ambition, and commitment to ethical behavior. Together, we explored ideas, discussed current events, and supported one another in both work and study. These relationships reinforced the importance of empathy, loyalty, and collaboration, qualities essential not just for friendship, but for leadership and responsible citizenship. Nature continued to be a source of reflection and solace. I often took walks along rivers, through forests, and across fields, observing the patterns of life and the changes of seasons. These moments provided perspective, calm, and insight. I learned patience, attentiveness, and the value of observation, lessons that extended beyond nature and into work, study, and human relationships. That I also encountered challenges that tested my resolve. The transition from school to work, the demands of responsibility, and the uncertainties of the future sometimes caused doubt and apprehension. Yet, each difficulty reinforced resilience. I learned that perseverance, thoughtful reflection, and adherence to moral principles are essential when navigating the complexities of life. Mistakes became lessons, and setbacks became opportunities to grow stronger and wiser. Through these early experiences, I began to envision a broader purpose for my life. I wanted to serve my community, to make choices that would benefit others, and to develop the skills and understanding necessary for a life of meaningful contribution. I realized that the combination of knowledge, character, and diligence was the foundation for both personal fulfillment and public service. By the end of this early stage of professional life, I had developed confidence, practical skills, and a growing awareness of responsibility. I understood that leadership begins with small, conscientious actions, that knowledge is only meaningful when applied with wisdom, and that integrity is the cornerstone of all endeavors. With these lessons in hand, I was prepared to face the next phase of life: larger responsibilities, more complex challenges, and opportunities to expand both my abilities and my influence. As I settled more fully into the responsibilities of early adulthood, I began to take on work that required greater skill, judgment, and initiative. No longer were my tasks purely routine. I faced challenges that tested not only my knowledge and diligence, but also my ability to make decisions, solve problems, and consider the consequences of my actions. Each experience became a lesson in responsibility and self-discipline, shaping the way I approached both work and life. That I devoted myself to learning all I could from each task, observing carefully, asking questions, and reflecting on outcomes. I understood that success depended not merely on effort, but on thoughtful application of knowledge and consistent attention to detail. This period taught me that careful planning, patience, and integrity are as important as skill or talent in achieving meaningful results. Work also provided opportunities to interact with a broader range of people. I encountered colleagues, clients, and neighbors with varied perspectives and experiences. Listening and learning from them deepened my understanding of human nature and the challenges people face. I began to appreciate the importance of empathy, clear communication, and fairness in every interaction. The relationships I built during this period reinforced the idea that leadership is as much about character and understanding as it is about authority or ambition. Alongside professional growth, I continued to pursue knowledge. I read extensively about law, government, history, and ethics. I studied examples of leaders who had faced adversity and succeeded through careful reasoning, courage, and ethical conduct. These studies strengthened my desire to serve others responsibly, to combine practical skill with moral discernment, and to prepare myself for positions that would allow me to make a positive difference. At home, my parents' guidance remained invaluable. My father's example of steadfast effort and integrity reinforced the lessons I was learning in the wider world. My mother's counsel, emphasizing reflection, empathy, and moral consistency, reminded me that strength without compassion is incomplete. These lessons shaped both my personal conduct and my professional ambitions, ensuring that my growth was rooted in values as well as knowledge. Community engagement became increasingly meaningful. I participated in local organizations, observed public affairs, and began to understand the dynamics of civic responsibility. I witnessed firsthand how leadership decisions affected families, neighbors, and the broader community. These experiences emphasized that meaningful work is intertwined with service to others, and that integrity and thoughtfulness are essential for anyone who aspires to influence or guide others. Friendship and mentorship also played a critical role. I sought the company of those whose character, intellect, and judgment I admired. Through discussion, collaboration, and shared experience, I refined my understanding of leadership, ethics, and human nature. These relationships became both support and guidance, helping me navigate challenges, recognize opportunities, and cultivate the qualities necessary for growth and influence. Nature continued to provide clarity and perspective. Long walks, quiet observation of the seasons, and reflection on the rhythms of life offered balance amid work and study. I found that spending time outdoors helped me maintain focus, consider complex questions, and approach challenges with patience and insight. Nature remained a teacher, offering lessons in resilience, adaptability, and attentiveness that extended far beyond the forests and rivers of my youth. During this stage, I also faced moments of doubt, challenge, and occasional disappointment. Tasks did not always go as planned, and decisions sometimes produced unforeseen consequences. Yet, these experiences strengthened my resolve, teaching me the value of reflection, learning from mistakes, and persevering despite setbacks. I learned that resilience, careful judgment, and adherence to ethical principles are essential in both professional and personal life. By the end of this period, I had gained confidence in my abilities, clarity in my ambitions, and a deep understanding of responsibility. I recognized that knowledge, skill, and character must be cultivated together to prepare for meaningful leadership and service. I was ready to embrace greater challenges, take on larger responsibilities, and continue my growth toward adulthood and the wider roles I would eventually assume in life and society. As I progressed further into my professional life, the responsibilities I undertook became increasingly complex, and my decisions carried greater weight. No longer were my actions limited to routine tasks or simple duties. I was now faced with situations that required judgment, foresight, and careful consideration of both immediate and long-term consequences. Each challenge was an opportunity to refine my skills, strengthen my character, and prepare for leadership. That I dedicated myself to mastering my work, paying attention to detail, analyzing outcomes, and reflecting on lessons learned. I understood that competence alone was insufficient. Success depended on a combination of skill, insight, and integrity. This period taught me that leadership is not merely a position or title, but a responsibility to act wisely, ethically, and for the benefit of others. Interaction with others became a vital part of my growth. I engaged with colleagues, clients, and community members from diverse backgrounds, learning to appreciate different perspectives and experiences. Listening carefully, observing thoughtfully, and responding with fairness strengthened my judgment and deepened my understanding of human nature. I realized that empathy, respect, and patience are indispensable qualities for anyone aspiring to guide and influence others. Education remained a constant pursuit. I studied law, governance, history, and ethics, seeking to understand the principles that underlie effective leadership and sound decision-making. The lives of past leaders, their triumphs and failures, became both inspiration and cautionary tales. I absorbed lessons about courage, responsibility, and moral discernment, imagining how I might apply these principles in my own life. At home, my parents' guidance continued to shape my values. My father's steadfast work ethic and commitment to fairness offered a model of practical integrity. My mother's emphasis on reflection, compassion, and moral consistency reminded me that character and empathy are inseparable from effective leadership. These lessons reinforced the importance of balancing ambition with ethical conduct, a principle that would guide me throughout my career. Community involvement deepened during this stage. I participated in local affairs, observed governance processes, and began to understand the intricate interplay between individual action and communal well-being. I saw firsthand how decisions, whether large or small, could affect many lives, and I appreciated the profound responsibility inherent in public service. These experiences strengthened my desire to contribute meaningfully and to act with both prudence and courage. Friendship and mentorship remained central to my growth. I sought the counsel and companionship of individuals whose judgment, experience, and character I respected. Through shared discussion, debate, and collaborative effort, I refined my understanding of strategy, ethics, and human relationships. These connections not only provided guidance, but also reinforced the principle that leadership is exercised through collaboration, understanding, and mutual respect. Nature continued to offer perspective and tranquility. Walks through forests, along rivers, and across fields provided time for contemplation and reflection. Observing the rhythms of life and the patience inherent in natural processes reminded me of the value of foresight, careful planning, and measured action. These quiet moments nurtured clarity, focus, and a sense of equilibrium amid the increasing complexity of work and responsibility. Challenges during this period tested both my skill and character. Decisions did not always yield the desired outcomes. Unforeseen obstacles arose, and mistakes provided lessons in humility. Yet, each difficulty strengthened resilience, sharpened judgment, and reinforced the importance of acting with principle. I learned that leadership is honed through experience, reflection, and the consistent application of ethical standards. By the end of this stage, I had gained not only professional competence, but also the insight, judgment, and moral grounding necessary for leadership. I understood that true influence comes from a combination of knowledge, character, and thoughtful action. The lessons of work, study, community engagement, and personal reflection had prepared me to embrace greater responsibilities, to guide with fairness and integrity, and to continue on the path toward meaningful service and accomplishment in both public and personal life. As I took my first steps into public office, the lessons of my youth and early professional life proved invaluable. I understood that entering politics required careful preparation, patience, and a steadfast commitment to principle. I approached my responsibilities with diligence, seeking to serve my community thoughtfully while learning from every encounter, debate, and decision. My initial campaigns and public engagements were both exciting and humbling. I met citizens from all walks of life, listened to their concerns, and observed firsthand the hopes and challenges faced by my neighbors. These experiences reinforced the notion that political leadership is not about personal gain, but about understanding, empathy, and the careful balancing of competing needs. I realized that every word spoken, every decision made, carries weight and consequence. Early on, I faced skepticism and doubt, both from others and within myself. The political arena is full of differing opinions, strong personalities, and moments of tension. I learned that resilience, humility, and adherence to ethical standards are essential to navigate such challenges. Even when confronted with criticism or opposition, I remained focused on serving the public good and acting with integrity. Studying governance and law in greater depth became a priority. I examined legislation, local ordinances, and historical precedents to understand how policies are shaped and implemented. I recognized that knowledge without application is incomplete, and that informed decision-making is vital for effective leadership. I sought advice from experienced public servants, attended meetings, and observed processes carefully, learning the nuances of negotiation, collaboration, and compromise. Friendships and alliances played a crucial role in this period. I aligned myself with individuals who shared my values and commitment to ethical service. Through discussion, collaboration, and mutual support, I honed my understanding of politics as a means of service rather than ambition. I realized that leadership is strengthened not only by knowledge and skill, but also by trust, loyalty, and cooperation with those who share a common vision for the community. Community engagement deepened during this stage. I participated in civic projects, attended local events, and assisted with initiatives that directly affected people's lives. I learned that leadership is demonstrated through action, responsiveness, and accountability. The satisfaction of seeing tangible improvements in my town reinforced my belief that public service is both rewarding and demanding. Challenges were constant and sometimes daunting. Decisions often involved competing interests, and outcomes were not always predictable. Yet, each difficulty was an opportunity to develop judgment, patience, and problem-solving skills. I learned to weigh short-term needs against long-term goals, to consider the perspectives of many, and to remain guided by principles even in complex situations. Reflection remained essential. I frequently considered my motivations, the impact of my choices, and the responsibilities I had undertaken. I asked myself whether I was acting fairly, wisely, and ethically, and how my actions aligned with my vision for service. These moments of introspection strengthened my resolve and clarified my path forward. By the end of this early political period, I had begun to understand the realities of governance, the challenges of public life, and the qualities necessary to serve effectively. I had learned that knowledge, integrity, empathy, and perseverance are the pillars of responsible leadership. These lessons prepared me to face larger roles and responsibilities in the political sphere, guided always by the principles and values that had shaped my character since youth. As I grew more confident in my professional and personal life, my attention naturally turned toward public affairs. I had long observed the workings of my community, the responsibilities of leaders, and the impact of decisions on the lives of neighbors and townspeople. The principles I had learned in my youth, diligence, integrity, empathy, and reflection, suggested that contributing to the larger world might be the next meaningful step in my life. That I began to study politics more seriously, reading about government, law, and history. I was fascinated by how societies function, how leaders make choices, and how policies affect the daily lives of ordinary people. The successes and failures of past leaders provided lessons in courage, prudence, and moral responsibility. I realized that leadership required not only knowledge and ambition, but also the ability to act ethically under pressure and to consider the long-term consequences of one's decisions. Observation became a key part of my learning. I attended public meetings, listened to debates, and engaged with local officials when possible. These experiences taught me about the practical challenges of governance, the negotiations, compromises, and careful planning required to balance competing interests. I also saw how charisma, communication, and personal integrity influence public perception and trust. Understanding these dynamics reinforced my desire to approach politics thoughtfully and with unwavering ethical standards. Friendships and mentorship took on a new dimension during this period. I sought guidance from individuals who had experience in public service, whose judgment I respected, and whose values aligned with my own. Their counsel helped me navigate the complexities of civic engagement, consider the perspectives of others, and prepare for the responsibilities I might assume in the future. These relationships underscored the principle that leadership is cultivated not in isolation, but through collaboration, learning, and ethical guidance. Alongside my growing interest in politics, I continued to refine my professional skills. I understood that competence in work, knowledge of the world, and personal integrity are inseparable from effective leadership. Practical experience provided context for my studies and informed my understanding of the challenges and opportunities that public service entails. I began to see that meaningful leadership requires preparation, patience, and a commitment to continuous learning. Community involvement became more intentional. I volunteered for local initiatives, assisted in civic projects, and observed how decisions at the town level affected people's lives. These experiences strengthened my understanding that governance is about service, not personal gain, and that every choice carries responsibility. I also witnessed the power of collaboration, compromise, and thoughtful communication in achieving positive outcomes for the community. During this time, self-reflection and introspection were constant companions. I considered my own ambitions, my strengths and weaknesses, and the ethical principles that would guide me. I asked myself how I could balance personal goals with service to others, how to act with courage yet remain fair, and how to cultivate the qualities necessary for public trust. These reflections became the foundation for the decisions I would make in my early political career. Nature remained a source of inspiration and clarity. Quiet walks and moments of observation helped me organize my thoughts, reflect on my experiences, and consider the lessons I had learned from people, work, and history. Nature taught patience, attentiveness, and the value of seeing the long view, qualities essential for anyone seeking to understand the complexities of public life. By the end of this formative period, I had begun to develop the knowledge, judgment, and moral grounding necessary for political engagement. I understood that contributing to society required preparation, reflection, and a deep commitment to ethical principles. The lessons of family, community, work, and study had prepared me for this next stage, where ambition would meet responsibility and where leadership would be tested in service to others. As I advanced further into public life, my responsibilities expanded and the decisions I faced became increasingly complex. I began to recognize the full weight of leadership, not as a title, but as a responsibility to act thoughtfully, ethically, and for the benefit of the community. Every choice I made, every action I took, had consequences for those I represented, and I was determined to meet these challenges with integrity and diligence. Through early experience, I developed a more nuanced understanding of governance. I observed how policies are debated, negotiated, and implemented, and I came to appreciate the balance required between competing interests. Leadership, I realized, is not about dominating decisions or seeking recognition, but about listening, understanding, and making informed choices that serve the greater good. This understanding guided my approach to both routine matters and complex dilemmas that I also learned the importance of communication and persuasion. Speaking with citizens, colleagues, and political peers taught me that clarity, empathy, and honesty are essential for trust. Explaining decisions, listening to concerns, and addressing misunderstandings required patience and tact. These skills reinforce the idea that leadership is as much about relationships and trust as it is about knowledge or authority. Friendship, mentorship, and alliances were invaluable during this stage. I sought guidance from experienced leaders, learned from their successes and mistakes, and relied on trusted companions for advice and perspective. Collaboration became a cornerstone of effective action, reinforcing the principle that leadership thrives when knowledge, judgment, and effort are shared among those who value ethics and service. Community engagement continued to shape my perspective. I attended meetings, participated in local initiatives, and closely observed the needs of citizens. These experiences reminded me that public service is a constant balancing act between ambition and humility, between decisiveness and prudence, and between immediate needs and long-term vision. I realized that effective leadership requires both practical skill and moral judgment, applied consistently and conscientiously. Challenges became opportunities for growth. I faced conflicts, differing opinions, and the pressures inherent in leadership. At times, the weight of responsibility was daunting, but I learned to rely on careful reflection, patience, and the guidance of ethical principles. Each obstacle strengthened my resolve, sharpened my decision-making, and deepened my understanding of what it means to lead responsibly. During this period, I also maintained personal study and reflection. Reading about historical leaders, legal principles, and governance strategies reinforced lessons learned from experience. Nature continued to provide clarity and perspective. Walks, quiet observation, and moments of contemplation helped me process challenges, evaluate decisions, and maintain equilibrium amid the pressures of public life. By the end of this stage, I had begun to emerge as a capable and thoughtful leader. I had cultivated judgment, resilience, ethical grounding, and practical skill, the pillars upon which effective political service is built. I understood that leadership is a lifelong process of learning, reflection, and application, and that the responsibilities entrusted to a public servant require continuous diligence, humility, and commitment. With this foundation, I was prepared to embrace broader roles, greater responsibilities, and more significant challenges in public life. The lessons of early experience, mentorship, study, and community engagement had prepared me to act not for personal glory, but for the benefit of the people I served. Leadership, I realized, is most meaningful when guided by knowledge, integrity, and the unwavering commitment to do what is right. As I gained experience in public service, my responsibilities expanded, and I began to see the tangible impact of my work on the community. The lessons of my youth, early professional life, and initial political involvement guided every decision. I understood that meaningful leadership requires patience, dedication, and a constant commitment to principle. With this understanding, I embarked on initiatives and responsibilities that would mark the beginning of my broader political influence. My first significant successes came from initiatives that addressed pressing needs within the community. I worked to ensure that resources were allocated fairly, that local projects were completed efficiently, and that the voices of ordinary citizens were heard and respected. These efforts demonstrated that thoughtful action and ethical leadership could produce visible improvements, and they strengthened my resolve to pursue further public service. Recognition from the public and peers was both encouraging and humbling. I learned that acknowledgement is less about personal pride and more about the trust and confidence of those you serve. With each expression of support or gratitude, I felt a deepened responsibility to act with integrity and to ensure that every decision I made would benefit not only immediate concerns, but also the long-term welfare of the community. The work itself offered invaluable lessons. I encountered complex situations that required careful judgment, negotiation, and collaboration. I learned to weigh competing interests, anticipate consequences, and make choices that reflected both ethical standards and practical considerations. Each experience reinforced the understanding that leadership is not simply a matter of authority, but of service, foresight, and moral clarity. Friendships, mentorship, and alliances continue to play a pivotal role. I sought guidance from experienced leaders, built alliances with colleagues who shared my vision, and cultivated relationships with community members whose insight and perspective enriched my decision-making. These connections reinforced the principle that effective leadership is strengthened by collaboration, trust, and a shared commitment to ethical conduct. At the same time, I continued to invest in personal study and reflection. I read extensively about governance, law, and historical examples of effective leadership. The successes and failures of past leaders offered both inspiration and caution, and I reflected on how these lessons could guide my own approach. I also maintained quiet time in nature, walking through fields and forests, reflecting on the responsibilities I carried, and considering the long-term implications of my choices. Challenges were never absent. Decisions often involved opposing interests, unexpected obstacles, and the scrutiny of the public eye. Yet, these difficulties became opportunities for growth. I learned to approach problems methodically, to consult trusted advisors, and to act with both courage and prudence. I discovered that resilience, adaptability, and steadfast adherence to principle are essential for meaningful political influence. By the end of this period, I had begun to establish a reputation as a capable, thoughtful, and ethical leader. My work, grounded in experience, study, and reflection, had earned the trust of both citizens and colleagues. I understood that the path of public service is ongoing, requiring continual diligence, ethical clarity, and a commitment to the welfare of others. These accomplishments marked the first step in a trajectory that would carry me to broader influence and greater responsibility, demonstrating that principled action combined with perseverance can produce tangible, lasting impact. As I continued my work in public service, my responsibilities and influence expanded beyond the local community. The decisions I made and initiatives I led began to have wider implications, affecting not only my town but the surrounding regions, and, eventually, garnering attention at a national level. This period marked a significant transition in my career, a move from local impact to broader political significance that I focused on policies and programs that addressed pressing societal issues. Whether it involved infrastructure, economic development, or public welfare, I sought solutions that were both practical and equitable. Each project required careful planning, negotiation, and collaboration with others who shared responsibility for implementation. I learned to anticipate challenges, adapt to changing circumstances, and balance competing interests with fairness and foresight. The recognition I received at the state and national levels was humbling. It was clear that principled action, diligence, and effective leadership could attract attention beyond one's immediate circle. I understood that with greater visibility came greater responsibility. Every statement, decision, and initiative could influence public perception, policy outcomes, and the lives of countless individuals. This awareness reinforced the importance of maintaining ethical standards, careful deliberation, and consistent integrity. Communication became increasingly essential. I engaged with constituents, colleagues, and leaders from other regions, explaining policies, listening to concerns, and building consensus. These interactions taught me that clarity, empathy, and honesty are indispensable qualities for sustaining trust and credibility. I learned to convey complex ideas in understandable ways while remaining true to my principles and vision. Friendships, mentorships, and political alliances continued to shape my journey. I sought guidance from experienced leaders whose judgment I respected and whose integrity matched my own. These relationships provided invaluable support, advice, and perspective, allowing me to navigate more complex political landscapes and to understand the broader consequences of leadership decisions. Collaboration, I realized, was not just strategic but ethical, ensuring that policies served the common good rather than individual ambition. Challenges multiplied as my influence grew. Opposition arose from those with differing views, and decisions often had unintended consequences. Yet, these challenges strengthened my judgment, patience, and resilience. I learned to assess risks carefully, to weigh both immediate and long-term effects, and to act decisively when necessary. Each difficulty reinforced the principle that leadership requires both courage and prudence, tempered by a commitment to fairness and ethical responsibility. Throughout this period, I maintained a focus on personal growth and reflection. Reading, study, and observation remained essential tools for understanding governance, history, and human behavior. Nature continued to provide moments of clarity, offering quiet space for contemplation and strategic thinking. These habits ensured that my decisions were informed not only by experience and knowledge, but also by careful reflection and moral consideration. By the end of this stage, I had established a reputation as a leader whose actions were guided by principle, knowledge, and dedication to public service. My work had tangible effects, improving lives and setting standards for responsible governance. I understood that true leadership is measured not by recognition alone, but by the lasting positive impact one can create for society. This period solidified my commitment to service and prepared me for even greater responsibilities, as my influence extended toward national recognition and broader historical significance. As my career progressed, I found myself entrusted with responsibilities of unprecedented scope and significance. The culmination of years of preparation, service, and ethical guidance brought me to a stage where the decisions I made could shape not only communities, but the course of a nation. Leadership at this level demanded courage, wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to principle. During this period, I pursued policies that addressed pressing national challenges. Economic stability, social welfare, and the maintenance of public trust became central priorities. Each initiative required collaboration with colleagues, consultation with advisors, and careful consideration of both immediate outcomes and long-term consequences. I realized that effective leadership demands a balance of decisiveness, empathy, and foresight, and that the stakes of each decision were far greater than any I had faced previously. Public scrutiny was constant, and the weight of expectation was immense. Citizens, colleagues, and observers closely monitored my actions and words. I learned that visibility amplifies both praise and criticism, and that the measure of leadership is how one responds to both with consistency and integrity. Maintaining trust required transparency, honesty, and an adherence to principles even under pressure, and I committed myself fully to this standard. Alliances and mentorship continued to be crucial. Experienced advisors, peers of integrity, and trusted friends provided insight, perspective, and guidance. I understood that leadership at this level is never solitary. The wisdom of others, combined with careful judgment, strengthens both decisions and outcomes. Collaboration became both a practical necessity and a moral imperative, ensuring that the policies pursued were balanced, equitable, and just. Challenges were more complex than ever. Conflicting interests, political opposition, and unforeseen consequences tested my patience, resolve, and judgment. Yet, each challenge offered the opportunity to refine strategy, practice resilience, and uphold ethical standards. I learned that enduring leadership requires a steady hand, a reflective mind, and a heart committed to serving the public good rather than personal ambition. Education and reflection remained central to my approach. I studied history, law, and governance continuously, seeking to learn from the experiences of those who had preceded me. Nature continued to provide moments of clarity, offering quiet spaces for thought and perspective. These habits ensured that decisions were informed not only by experience and knowledge, but also by careful contemplation and moral reasoning. The culmination of these efforts was not merely personal achievement, but the establishment of a legacy rooted in service, principle, and tangible impact. Policies implemented, communities supported, and challenges addressed left an imprint that extended beyond my immediate tenure. I understood that true historical influence is measured not by titles or accolades, but by the lasting effects of one's actions on the lives of others and the integrity of institutions. By the end of this period, I had fully embraced the responsibilities and complexities of high political leadership. I had learned that success in public life requires a combination of preparation, ethical grounding, resilience, and humility. The lessons of my youth, early career, initial political experience, and sustained reflection had prepared me to act with wisdom, courage, and unwavering principle. I recognized that the most enduring form of leadership is one guided by service, integrity, and a deep commitment to the common good, and I dedicated myself to leaving a positive mark on history. The journey to the presidency was the culmination of years of preparation, service, and steadfast commitment to principle. I approached this stage of my life with both humility and determination, fully aware that the responsibilities of the office demanded wisdom, foresight, and unwavering ethical guidance. The experiences of my youth, early career, and political development had prepared me, but the magnitude of leadership at this level brought new challenges and opportunities. Campaigning for the highest office was both exhilarating and humbling. I met citizens from across the nation, listened to their concerns, and learned firsthand the hopes, fears, and aspirations of the people I sought to serve. Each encounter reinforced the understanding that leadership is rooted in empathy, attentiveness, and the ability to translate ideals into action. I recognized that the trust placed in me was a sacred responsibility, not a personal triumph. The transition from candidate to president-elect brought a mixture of anticipation and solemn reflection. I considered the enormity of the task ahead, guiding a nation through both prosperity and challenge, balancing competing interests, and maintaining the confidence of citizens and institutions alike. I reflected on the principles that had shaped my life: integrity, diligence, empathy, and reflection, and understood that they would guide every decision I would make in office. Upon assuming the presidency, the scope of responsibility became immediately evident. Decisions carried implications for every citizen, every institution, and even the broader international community. I approached each issue methodically, consulting trusted advisors, weighing evidence, and considering both short-term and long-term consequences. The lessons of careful planning, observation, and moral deliberation proved invaluable in navigating the complexities of governance. Early priorities centered on stabilizing the economy, ensuring public confidence, and maintaining the integrity of governmental institutions. I focused on policies that promoted fairness, efficiency, and ethical administration. The work required both strategic vision and attention to detail, demonstrating that leadership is as much about practical management as it is about ideals. I understood that tangible results reinforce public trust and that every decision carries both responsibility and consequence. Communication with the public was paramount. I sought to convey policies clearly, listen attentively to concerns, and inspire confidence through transparency and integrity. The relationship between citizen and leader is built on trust, and I devoted myself to ensuring that my actions reflected both competence and ethical commitment. Public discourse, I learned, is not merely an exchange of ideas, but a reflection of shared responsibility and mutual respect. Challenges arose immediately and consistently. Economic fluctuations, political opposition, and unforeseen events tested judgment, patience, and resilience. I relied on the principles that had guided my life, as well as the counsel of experienced advisors, to navigate difficult decisions. Each challenge reinforced the importance of steadfastness, adaptability, and ethical clarity in sustaining effective leadership. Even amidst the demands of office, I continued personal study and reflection. History, law, and governance offered guidance, while moments of solitude and observation in nature provided clarity and perspective. These practices ensured that decisions were grounded not only in practical necessity, but also in thoughtful contemplation and ethical consideration. By the end of this initial stage of my presidency, I had begun to understand the full weight of national leadership. The lessons of experience, education, and moral guidance had prepared me to act with wisdom, prudence, and integrity. I recognized that the true measure of a president lies not in titles or accolades, but in the enduring impact of policies, the preservation of public trust, and the unwavering commitment to serve the common good. As my presidency progressed, I quickly realized that leadership at the national level is tested most severely during times of crisis. Economic fluctuations, social unrest, and unexpected events challenged both judgment and resolve. Each situation required careful analysis, consultation with advisors, and the application of ethical principles to guide decisions that would impact millions of lives. That I approached each crisis methodically. First, understanding the problem in depth was essential: its causes, potential consequences, and the perspectives of those affected. I consulted experts, reviewed historical examples, and considered both immediate remedies and long-term solutions. Leadership, I learned, is not reactive alone but must combine foresight, strategy, and ethical deliberation. Policy implementation became a constant focus. It was not enough to propose solutions. I needed to ensure that plans were practical, effective, and executed with integrity. Oversight, attention to detail, and clear communication with agencies and staff were critical. I realized that competent governance requires both vision and meticulous management, and that every policy carries a moral dimension affecting citizens' lives. Public communication played a central role in crisis management. I sought to explain the rationale behind decisions clearly, acknowledging uncertainties when they existed, and reassuring citizens through transparency and honesty. Trust is fragile in times of uncertainty, and I understood that integrity and clarity are indispensable for maintaining confidence in leadership. Challenges arose from multiple directions. Political opposition, economic pressures, and unforeseen consequences tested patience and judgment. I learned to weigh competing interests carefully, anticipate ripple effects, and remain steadfast in adherence to principle. Resilience, measured action, and ethical clarity became guiding forces in navigating these complex circumstances. Collaboration and mentorship remained vital. Trusted advisors and experienced colleagues provided perspective, expertise, and support. I learned that effective leadership is strengthened by collective wisdom and that relying on the insights of others does not diminish responsibility, but enhances the quality of decisions. Partnerships were essential for both practical policy execution and maintaining moral grounding. Community and citizen engagement were not neglected. Even amid national crises, I sought input from local leaders, community representatives, and ordinary citizens. Listening to diverse perspectives allowed me to understand the real-world impact of policies and adapt responses to serve the greater good. I realized that leadership is inseparable from service and that public trust is earned through responsiveness and accountability. Personal reflection and study remained a cornerstone of my approach. I continued to consult history, law, and governance principles, and I preserved moments of quiet observation in nature to gain clarity and perspective. These practices helped me maintain focus, balance, and ethical awareness while navigating high-pressure situations. By the conclusion of this period, I had come to understand the immense responsibilities of the presidency during times of crisis. Leadership requires not only intelligence and skill, but also moral courage, resilience, and the capacity to act in the best interest of the nation. The lessons learned during these challenges reinforced the principles that had guided my life: integrity, diligence, empathy, and thoughtful reflection. I recognized that the true test of leadership is measured not by the absence of difficulty, but by the steadiness, fairness, and wisdom with which challenges are met. As my presidency drew toward its conclusion, I reflected on the full measure of responsibility that had been entrusted to me. Every decision, every policy, every challenge had shaped not only my understanding of leadership, but also the lives of countless citizens. I realized that the office demands a combination of practical skill, ethical commitment, and the ability to balance immediate needs with long-term consequences. That I reviewed the policies and initiatives implemented during my term. Some had immediate effects, stabilizing the economy, supporting infrastructure, or addressing social concerns, while others would influence the nation's trajectory for years to come. Each accomplishment, though sometimes modest in scope, represented the careful application of principle, judgment, and collaborative effort. I understood that true leadership is measured less by personal acclaim than by the lasting, positive impact of one's actions. Reflection on challenges faced was equally instructive. Crises, opposition, and unforeseen events tested patience, resilience, and ethical clarity. I considered how decisions were made, what lessons were learned, and how experiences might inform the governance of future leaders. Difficult moments highlighted the importance of integrity, humility, and reliance on both knowledge and the counsel of trusted advisors. These lessons reinforce the idea that leadership is a continual process of learning, reflection, and adaptation. The relationships formed during my presidency remained invaluable. Advisors, colleagues, mentors, and citizens provided guidance, support, and insight. I realized that leadership is strengthened through collaboration and shared commitment to the public good. Trust, respect, and mutual understanding are the foundations of effective governance, and these principles guided every decision I made. Public communication and engagement had been central to maintaining trust and transparency. I had endeavored to convey policies clearly, acknowledge uncertainties when necessary, and address concerns with honesty and empathy. I learned that enduring leadership relies on building relationships with citizens based on respect, responsiveness, and ethical consistency. Public trust is fragile, yet it can be reinforced through transparency, accountability, and the demonstration of moral courage. Personal reflection and continued study remained integral. Reading about history, law, and governance provided context, while moments of solitude and observation in nature offered clarity and perspective. These habits ensured that each decision was informed not only by practical necessity, but also by ethical and long-term considerations. Leadership, I realized, requires balance between action and reflection, between responsibility and introspection. As my term ended, I contemplated the legacy I would leave behind. I understood that historical significance is not defined solely by titles or recognition, but by the enduring effects of policies, the ethical conduct of leadership, and the lasting confidence of citizens and institutions. The lessons learned through service, reflection, and perseverance would continue to inform my perspective, and I hope that future leaders might draw upon these experiences as guidance. Ultimately, I recognize that the measure of a presidency lies in service to others, the principled exercise of authority, and the ability to navigate complex challenges with integrity and wisdom. The responsibilities I had embraced were profound, and the experiences had shaped me as a leader, a citizen, and a human being. I concluded my term with gratitude for the opportunity to serve, humility for the trust bestowed upon me, and a steadfast commitment to the enduring principles that guided my life: integrity, diligence, empathy, and thoughtful reflection. After completing my presidency, I entered a period of life marked by quieter reflection, personal pursuits, and an appreciation for the experiences that had shaped me. No longer occupied by the constant demands of office, I had the opportunity to consider the arc of my career, the decisions I had made, and the lessons learned along the way. These reflections provided both satisfaction and perspective. I devoted time to family, reconnecting with loved ones, and valuing moments of shared conversation, simple daily routines, and personal companionship. The intimacy of private life offered balance after years of public responsibility, reminding me that leadership and service are sustained by human connection, empathy, and understanding. I realized that personal fulfillment and family bonds provide strength that supports public duty. Reflection on my professional and political journey was constant. I considered the decisions I had made, their outcomes, and the challenges faced in governance. Each experience, whether success or difficulty, offered lessons in judgment, ethical responsibility, and leadership. I observed patterns in history, both contemporary and past, and considered how these lessons might guide future leaders. That I also dedicated time to reading and study. Historical accounts, biographies, legal treatises, and philosophical works offered insight into human nature, governance, and the ethical foundations of leadership. These studies reinforced my understanding that wisdom is cultivated through observation, reflection, and careful analysis, and that the responsibilities of leadership extend beyond the moment to future generations. Community involvement remained important, though in a different capacity. I offered guidance, mentorship, and advice to younger leaders and aspiring public servants, sharing experience without expectation of personal gain. Observing their growth and witnessing the application of principles I valued reinforced my belief in the enduring impact of thoughtful, ethical leadership. Physical activity, walks in nature, and quiet observation provided clarity and tranquility. The cycles of seasons, the rhythms of rivers, and the patience evident in the natural world offered perspective on human challenges. These moments reminded me that many difficulties are temporary, that reflection brings insight, and that balanced judgment is a product of both experience and contemplation. Health and personal care became a priority. I understood that the responsibilities I had carried demanded resilience and vigor, and that maintaining physical and mental well-being allowed me to continue contributing meaningfully, even outside of formal office. Daily routines, moderation, and attention to wellness provided both energy and perspective for continued reflection. Through these experiences, I came to appreciate the continuity of life, the importance of ethical consistency, and the enduring relevance of personal character. Leadership, I realized, is not only about public service, but also about the cultivation of virtues that guide one through all stages of life. The lessons of diligence, empathy, integrity, and thoughtful reflection remain central, informing both daily living and broader contributions to society. By the end of this period of private life, I felt a sense of fulfillment in the knowledge that my efforts had sought to serve others responsibly and ethically. Reflection, study, family, and quiet engagement with the world provided a foundation for understanding my place in history and the enduring impact of leadership guided by principle. Even in retirement, I found opportunities to contribute to the public good, though in a different capacity than during my years in office. My focus shifted toward mentorship, advice, and support for civic initiatives, allowing me to share experience without the direct responsibilities of governance. I recognize that influence does not end with formal office. Guidance, example, and thoughtful counsel can shape society in lasting ways. That I maintained correspondence with colleagues, community leaders, and younger public servants, offering insight into decision-making, ethical leadership, and the practicalities of governance. These interactions reinforced the principle that leadership is cultivated over time, strengthened by experience, reflection, and the willingness to share knowledge. I took satisfaction in seeing others grow and succeed, knowing that principles of integrity, diligence, and empathy were being carried forward. Public speaking and appearances became opportunities to advocate for civic responsibility, education, and ethical service. I emphasized the importance of informed engagement, thoughtful deliberation, and consideration of long-term consequences. While no longer holding office, I sought to inspire awareness of the duties inherent in citizenship and the value of contributing to the common good. That I also engaged with charitable organizations, educational institutions, and community projects, supporting programs that improved public welfare, promoted learning, and facilitated opportunity allowed me to continue serving in meaningful ways. These contributions, though less visible than national policy, had tangible effects on individuals and communities, demonstrating that leadership and service extend beyond political office. Advisory roles provided both satisfaction and challenge. I offered perspectives on policy, ethics, and administration, while also listening to new ideas and innovative approaches. This two-way engagement reminded me that learning never ceases, and that even experience must be tempered by openness to evolving circumstances and changing societal needs. Observation of societal trends and historical developments continued to shape my perspective. I reflected on the long-term effects of policies enacted during my tenure, the evolving needs of citizens, and the ways in which ethical leadership contributes to stability, justice, and opportunity. These reflections reinforced my belief that leadership is an enduring responsibility, extending beyond immediate authority and into the realm of legacy. Community recognition and respect offered encouragement, but I remain mindful that true influence is measured by outcomes and integrity, not accolades. I valued the quiet satisfaction of knowing that guidance and mentorship had contributed positively to the growth of leaders, the improvement of institutions, and the welfare of citizens. Leadership, I understood, is most meaningful when it fosters the capacity of others to act with principle, competence, and empathy. Through continued study, reflection, and participation, I maintained a sense of purpose, engagement, and ethical clarity. Nature, reading, and personal reflection provided balance and insight, helping me navigate the complexities of public influence in retirement. I understood that contribution is not confined to formal authority. Thoughtful action, moral guidance, and the sharing of experience are enduring forms of service. By the conclusion of this period, I had come to appreciate the subtle yet profound ways in which one can continue to shape society and nurture future leaders. Retirement did not signify withdrawal from responsibility, but rather a transition to a different mode of engagement, one that relied on wisdom, ethical guidance, and the enduring commitment to the common good. In the later years of my life, I often reflected on how history might remember me and the legacy of the decisions, policies, and actions I had undertaken. Leadership, I realized, is ultimately measured not by titles or accolades, but by the enduring impact on individuals, communities, and institutions. This understanding shaped my thoughts as I considered the lessons of my career and the principles that had guided me throughout. That I reflected on the policies I had implemented and the initiatives I had championed. Some brought immediate relief or benefit, while others had effects that would unfold over decades. I considered the broader consequences of governance, recognizing that each choice had the potential to shape the future in ways unforeseen at the moment. The responsibility inherent in public service weighs heavily, but it also offers the opportunity to leave a lasting, positive imprint on society. Historical evaluation is never fixed, I understood. Scholars, citizens, and future leaders would interpret my decisions in ways both fair and critical. Yet, I derived satisfaction from knowing that integrity, diligence, and careful reflection had guided my actions. Even when outcomes were imperfect or unforeseen challenges arose, my adherence to principle and commitment to service remained steadfast. History, I hoped, would recognize that leadership is defined by both intent and ethical execution, that I also reflected on personal growth. The experiences of public life, from early political endeavors to the responsibilities of the presidency, had shaped character, judgment, and perspective. Each challenge had taught patience, resilience, and the importance of ethical clarity. The mistakes, successes, and lessons of my career formed a tapestry of experience that I could pass on to future generations, demonstrating the values necessary for responsible leadership. Mentorship and guidance became central to my legacy. Sharing knowledge, experience, and ethical perspective with younger leaders offered the possibility of multiplying impact beyond my own tenure. I took satisfaction in seeing others develop competence, wisdom, and a commitment to service. Leadership, I realized, is most enduring when it cultivates the capacity for principled action in those who followed. And I also considered the broader societal and historical context. National and international developments, changing social norms, and the evolution of governance all influence how leadership is remembered. I reflected on the ways in which my work had contributed to stability, justice, and opportunity, and how the ethical principles that guided my life could continue to serve as a model for others navigating complex public responsibilities. Finally, I contemplated the personal dimension of legacy. Family, friends, and the lives touched by public service offer a tangible measure of one's impact. Acts of empathy, guidance, and mentorship create a ripple effect that extends beyond the immediate sphere of authority. I recognize that historical memory is enriched not only by public accomplishment, but also by the cultivation of virtues that guide everyday action. By the end of this reflection, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. I had lived a life guided by principle, diligence, and service to others. I had faced challenges with courage, exercised judgment with care, and sought always to act with integrity. My hope was that history would remember not just the offices I held, but the ethical standards I upheld, the positive changes I contributed to society, and the lessons I imparted to future leaders. Leadership, I realized, is not only the exercise of power, but the cultivation of enduring values that benefit generations yet to come.